Welcome once again to Cinemaholics. I am a pop culture writer for Cinema Blend, and I also review films for The Playlist, Cut Print Film, and of course, cinemaholics.com. I'm Will Ashton. Now, you might be wondering to yourself, where's John? He usually says as part of the program. Unfortunately, he is unavailable to join us this week, but you have me, your regular co-host, Will Ashton, and joining me as I guess now, as per usual, our good friend. He is a critic and writer for several publications. Let's see, I got The Playlist, The Nashville Scene, and several more. It's Corey Woodruff. Am I forgetting anything else?
I don't think so, unless there's some us version of myself that's running around writing for not good publications other than the fines when you listed. That would be kind of a bummer. He's just writing stuff on the walls of bathrooms. He's just writing bad reviews. That's the person who said Toy Story is bad, or for Toy Story, the Dimitri Martin bit where he's like Toy Story 2 is bad.
Yeah, Toy Story 2 is just okay.
Yeah, it's I actually like Toy Story 2, so I'm pro Toy Story 2, and I'm Corey Woodruff. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm definitely of the opinion that Toy Story 2 is the strongest of the Toy Stories. I think John feels the same way as well, but I don't want to speak for him. So we have an episode that's devoted all about the Pixar ranking. You can check with that to figure out where he is on that. But anyway, I was going to say,
of all people, he would know of all people.
Yeah,
preeminent Pixar expert I look to.
Yeah, I forgot to put this on our off topics, but if you have an Entertainment Weekly subscription, he was interviewed in the latest, I think it was called the Behind the Scenes issue. So fans of the podcast, pick up your copy of Entertainment Weekly because John Negroni is in it, and I am looking forward to picking up that copy as well, reading what he had to say. I don't know if he mentioned Cinemaholics in it or not. I was kind of curious, but I have a feeling not. But we'll see. But anyway, if you like our show, you can find more episodes of Cinemaholics on adamtickets.com, as well as our full archive on cinemaholics.com. You can also write into the show anytime by emailing us at cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com, and you can support us directly by becoming one of our monthly patrons at patreon.com/cinemaholics. Now we got that out of the way. And just before I forget, Corey, I was going to say, so you've been on the show, I think now 3 times or 4 times?
Yeah, this is my third.
Third time, okay. Because there's The Kid Would Be King, and then Greta, right?
Greta, yeah.
Yeah. So I was going to say, we're getting to the point where this is almost going to be Coreyaholics, right?
Yeah, it is, really, which is, not a good thing.
What? I think it's a great thing.
Oh, it could be, but then if I go to Coreyaholics, I'll have to get into all my terrible movie opinions. And then we'll get into, I don't know. I'll do a 2-hour Space Jam episode, and it'll just get crazy.
Well,
Nobody wants that.
You're talking to the guy who's, I believe now, okay, I'll promote this early. I am 3 episodes into my podcast, The Ogre to Its Ogre Season 3. And I wanted to let... podcast. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. You've been on the show, I should mention, I believe last June or July?
Yeah, it was late last summer. We did Cat in the Hat. And then I am very excited to get a Garfield viewing in because it's just, what in the world? That's a movie exists.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get you on at one point because, why not?
Life's short.
Yeah. But I wanted to let everyone know that our 3rd episode is now available, and it's live, I guess I should say, in more ways than one, because it's our first live episode of the podcast. We recorded it in front of a live studio audience filled with adoring fans.
Hey, it was filled with all those Garfield phones that washed up on the beach.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just a bunch of those poured in.
Yeah, I was a little bummed, real talk, that that happened after we recorded our episode this month. But we'll probably talk about that in April because
yeah, that's all you really can talk about because you're gonna run out of things to say about Garfield the movie. It's just gonna get to June, and you're gonna be let's go through the rest of Bill Murray's accidental filmography.
Oh man, we'll see. But I also wanted to let everyone know we have an extra milestone episode that's now available. It's a one that was previously a Patreon exclusive, but now it's available for everybody. Now that the month of March is coming to a close, it is our Some Like It Hot episode, which I haven't gotten a chance to listen back to yet, but I have a feeling it's a pretty darn good one, just because it felt good. I don't know if have you seen Some Like It Hot, Corey?
I have not. I've got it in one of my big movies to watch stack in my room, so yeah. I'm looking forward to getting into that one.
It was on my list of similar. It was similar to you. It was on my list of films that I've been meaning to see for forever, and finally I got a chance to see it, and it was really, really good. It holds
Get
up.
that and Gentlemen's Prefer Blondes confused because they're both kind of like have the same like template, I guess.
Well,
Marilyn Monroe screwball comedies.
they're both Billy Wilder and they both star Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah,
So that makes sense. I think it's a pretty fair mix up.
I like that one. It's a good movie.
I still haven't seen that one actually. I don't think John's gonna like this, but I'm actually pretty behind on my Billy Wilder filmography.
So, yeah, that's like there's some like that's the big one that I'm just kind of like I got nothing. I've seen one, but
Mm-hmm.
great.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to Cinema.
Yeah.
Film experts who have not seen any Billy Wilder movies are going to yell about Dumbo.
Yeah. And then one last podcast to promote. John was on the latest episode of Bacons and Eggs. Let me pre-pronounce that, Bacon and Eggs. He talked about Jordan Peele's Us. They had a pretty spoiler-filled conversation, which was the topic of our last episode of Cinemaholics.
And not to talk about.
Yeah. First, before we get into some of our listener comments, Corey, I wanted you to have the platform for a bit. Tell us a little bit about how you felt about Us.
I loved it. I mean, it's just a movie I think that, like a lot of what Get Out was, it just rewards itself more and more and more as you go along. And that's something I really began to pick up about genre films and horror specifically, is that it opens itself to new ways for you the further you get removed. Because I feel like when you watch a horror film, there's almost that anticipation of like, am I going to get scared? Am I going to kind of follow this trail? Where is it going to go? How bleak is this going to get? And I think that, like Us, it's like, as I keep looking back on it, I keep beginning to be impressed that he tells such a small story in such a grand way. Because it's really just a home invasion film with some weird stuff thrown in, but it's just like the depth to it and just the mystery and the brilliance of the craft and the performances. I mean, it all just like boils down to a very exact sense of what Jordan Peele is doing. And I think it's finally time we can just kind of sit down and be like, this guy is one of the new great directors. And I know that you don't want to do that for a person after one movie because, sometimes they can be one-hit wonders, but I'm enamored with it. It's just going to get better as you think about it. And it's just like, it's my favorite movie of the year so far. And I think it's just another testament to what a good moment we are for genre right now. I feel like that genre horror is in a really good place. And there's just a lot of exciting artists working in that field. There's a lot of studio willingness to fund stuff like that because it can be so low budget and have such high return. Like, it's just a good time for exploratory horror and impactful horror that has great messages and deals with craft in different ways. Like, I looked at Mandy last year, which was my favorite movie of 2018. Like, what Panos Cosmatos did instead of his big canvas. Like, it's a good time for that genre, and I just feel like that Us is just another example of, if you're a horror fan, that you're in a good place.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree 100%. And all I have to add is that I think Chris Evangelista, who was on our Glass episode, he wrote on Twitter that this kind of feels like what The Shining might be for our generation. And I don't know if that's going to be true or not because it's still very early on.
Yeah.
But that feels pretty apt. That feels something like a film like that. If you haven't seen the documentary Room 237, great documentary. If you just want to hear just like off the wall theories about a film that some of them are just completely bonkers and some of them are like, maybe there's something to this. I feel like in maybe a more practical and realistic sense, I could see us just curating all these fantastical theories and very realistic and relevant theories as well. And it's going to be a pretty amazing time, I think, for that film. I hope it has great long legs. But let me just talk real briefly about some of the comments we've gotten from our last episode. And let's see. Sal York said, great episode. You guys really nailed what I love so much about the movie. The scares are great, but the themes run much deeper. I can't stop thinking about the experience of seeing this film and seeing it again. So thank you, Sal York. I appreciate that. And I'm sure John appreciates that as well. Let's see what else. I would say, Blather B said, I would go far enough to say this film is a masterpiece and will be recognized as such within time. Every line of dialogue is intentional. Every visual lends meaning to the overall picture. I can't get this movie off my mind, and that's what the best movies do. No. Totally agree with you there. And let's see. James also said, I didn't like this one as much as Get Out, but the conversation around the movie has been fascinating to read and listen to. It's so obvious Jordan Peele knows how to make horror films people actually want to see and talk about. Yeah. I can't disagree. Although I will say, I mean, to your point, Corey, I think this is a fantastic point for horror films. But I think horror films have always been pretty great. But I think this boon that we have right now has been
Yeah.
extra great. And
Because
I think what it's really doing is giving it a little more respect and a little more credibility that I think it's always been there in some ways, but in a general populist sense, it's been kind of overlooked. So I think for me as a horror fan, that part of it has been really, really exciting and really, really hopeful.
it wasn't like 20 years ago that that genre was almost dead in the water. I mean, you had some exciting people working outside of the mainstream, but it was like we were on our like 18th Friday the 13th movie and
Are you
Nightmare on
saying that Ghost Ship is not a great film?
I'm saying that Ghost Ship is going to sail back into our conversation one day. That and I don't know. We needed like ghost ships, and that needed to have like its own that was like a planes spinoff. It was
Yeah.
like Mater goes on a cruise, and it's like it's a ghost ship.
I was thinking like Ghost Tugboat.
Yeah,
Just think like a smaller venture, like the
yeah.
Blumhouse company can kind of do something with that. I think for 10 million.
Ghost dinghy.
Yeah. Oh man.
I cannot wait for that series.
Yeah. Oh man. I feel kind of bad. We have to go into a bit of a downer point, but I don't know if there's any good transition for what is ultimately fairly heartbreaking news.
Well, we
And
can transition from like great film of the present to great film that marked the past.
yeah, but we were talking about Ghost Ship.
That's true. I want to bring up all of these great films from
Yeah.
fear.com or something.
Fear.net.
Fear.net.
Oh man.
Oh gosh.
Anyway, I just want to recognize that Agnes Varda,
Mhm.
a legendary French filmmaker, easily I think one of the most well accredited and respected filmmakers of her time, and I'd say now as well, has ultimately passed away at the age of 90 this week. Which I'll turn this one over to you, Corey. What's your familiarity with Agnes Varda? I know she has a great and long and lasting influence on a lot of film fans, but I was curious to hear where she stands with you personally.
It's one of those filmmakers where it's like I know her. I've not seen any of her films,
Oh,
and it's
really?
like yeah, it's very embarrassing for me. I'm pretty bad with the French New Wave. Like I've
Okay.
seen a little bit, but it's like you don't need if you know movies, you don't need to have seen any of her films to know what she meant.
Hmm.
Because like I feel that people have kept her alive and have kept her work at the forefront of our conversation. It's just I think it's beginning to get to a point now where it's becoming almost a requirement that if you really want to get into this stuff, like you really need to know who Varda was. And I feel like it's not always been that case. Because it's just we're in a different world right now, thankfully, where we can have more discussion about a wider breadth of what it means to be a film fan. Because I feel like, sometimes we get so caught up in the meat and potatoes of, I know Spielberg, I know Scorsese, I know this and that. But it feels like even from that sense, Varda is beginning to be more, I don't know, prevalent. And maybe it's just I'm becoming more aware of her as time goes on. And she obviously was a brilliant filmmaker. I missed Faces Places last year or 2017, and that one really is one I want to revisit pretty quickly. But I mean, obviously, like you look back at the French New Wave, and you have your Truffauts, you have your Demis, and you have folks that were really working hard at that time to pioneer that style, and she was right there. And
Hmm.
really, I think that it's always kind of bittersweet when this happens, but I think she's going to be an artist that will even like obviously she has her pretty distinct fan base, but like I feel like her work will become even more prevalent as time goes on because it just has stayed so evergreen, and the themes she was dealing with were the themes that like she's that we have to deal with now. And I think when film can take that universal slant of always being at the forefront of the conversation, then like I'm very excited to dig into this because I feel like this is embarrassing. When Prince died, I was not that familiar with Prince. I mean, I knew Purple Rain and, the big songs, but it wasn't until after his death that I really began to kind of dig into who he was and the catalog and began to take this really great appreciation for who he was as an artist. And I just hate that sometimes it takes death for us to really dig into who some of these people were. And that's how it's going to be for me and Agnes Varda. It's like you knew who she was, you really appreciated her from an outside, but now it's like you have that impetus to kind of go back in. So, this is someone who I'm just now, I think, going to begin to really kind of dig back into. So I hate that this is the occasion for it, but I want to be able to appreciate her properly. So I'm going to take my own steps now to kind of rectify that little gap in my film knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I apologize for that. But yeah, I was going to say one of the great things about Agnes Varda's filmography, among several great things, is that thankfully a lot of it is available on streaming. Faces Places, as you mentioned, was her last film, and that's available on Netflix right now. And I actually did get to see that in theaters, thankfully, and it's a really, really special, touching film. I don't think I actually got a chance to talk about it much on the podcast. I don't even know if I ever got to bring it up because I saw it early on in our days of Cinemaholics podcasting, but I think one thing that really impressed upon people with her films is that they were very personal. They very much were films that she grew a connection through audiences by being very true to herself, very open and loving and sincere as a filmmaker, but also transcending new grounds. And I think that the reason I think this death is so impactful for several reasons is that Agnes Varda, you kind of, even if you didn't know her, if you never met her in person, you kind of felt like you knew her. You got that sense like you could grow a connection with her, that you had that meaningful interaction with her in some way or another. And I think that's just a quality of a great filmmaker, a way that you're able to have that connection, even though you can be miles apart and, several generations away. If you have that connection with an artist, that's truly powerful. And I mean, yeah, I would say, I think her most famous film would probably be Cleo from 5 to 7.
Mm-hmm.
From 1962. That was one of her earlier films, if not her first film. I don't know exactly, but there's Vagabond, there's The Gleaners and I, there's so many more. Please, if you get a chance, I know a lot of our listeners do the 52 films by women process, or some people call it challenge, but I don't feel like it's really a challenge to watch movies. But yeah. I don't like that term, so I try to figure out another way what to call it. 52 films by women opportunity. Is that a better one? Yeah.
The privilege.
Privilege, of course, yeah. Yeah, so I think if you're looking for a great filmmaker who has really, just proven herself time and time again throughout the medium of cinema, throughout multiple generations and many films, I would definitely recommend looking into her work. And I hope, like Corey, you get a chance to explore film, even though tragically she was no longer with us. So I just wanted to give us a little moment to talk about that. I just feel like she's such a filmmaker of monumental impact on the medium, especially in the early days of it, and at a point when it was changing into such a pivotal and inspirational point that it would be remiss of us not to talk about her. So
yeah, and what dexterity to be able to master fiction and documentary.
Of course, yeah.
I think, I feel like Werner Herzog's the easy comparison to make, but I feel like, she, like Herzog, was able to look at humanity through so many different ways. And it seems like she ended her career on a really positive note and a friendship and positivity there. And just because people said that movie was a riot. And that's just so fascinating to me that she really had that ability to just be so ambidextrous with the styles she would try to tell stories with. So, I mean, that's not easy.
Yeah, I mean, Faces Places is already a fairly bittersweet and self-reflective film to begin with, so I imagine it's even more so now. So yeah, I definitely would recommend that. Like I said, it's on Netflix. Check that out if you get a chance. Also, a lot of her films are on Canopy. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Cleo from 5 to 7 is in there as well, and it's also in the Criterion. So it's available. I'm sure a lot of her films are available at your local library or several other places. It's probably not too hard, hopefully, to find a lot of her work. So yeah, with that, that's a little bit of a downer, a little bit of a sad note to say. So let's bring things up a little bit.
Everyone's Disney rumination on the evils of mankind.
Yeah. That's one way to put it, I suppose. We're going to talk about Tim Burton's Dumbo. Corey, where would we begin with Tim Burton's Dumbo?
I think you have to begin to understand that they took a monumentally disguised film in the 1942 Dumbo or 43, whenever that did come out.
41, yeah.
41, okay. So it's right in that early 40 range. That is sincerely one of the just most dour Disney films I've ever watched. And it's only Disney would take a movie that starred this little adorable baby elephant that can fly, and then like just tuck in so many just erstwhile themes of mankind's greed and abilities to, take its, tyrannical ideas and take them to innocence, and just it's a very complicated movie. It's a very good movie. It's a very problematic movie with some
Yeah.
of its, very lazy stereotyping towards the end. But
Right.
it's just such a weird movie to like look at this and then look at what Tim Burton did.
Hmm.
And it's kind of like what he did with Alice in Wonderland, where it's like a lot of those themes and ideas that Lewis Carroll dealt with, who was obviously a very challenging person to reevaluate. And Alice in Wonderland, even the Disney film, is very much, you have to look back at it and be like, I look at this differently now that I'm a little old. We're a little bit further down the road. And then to watch Tim Burton's movie, and it's like, I don't see the disconnect at all. But I think that's because Disney doesn't tell stories like that anymore, I guess.
Yeah, well, before we get too ahead of ourselves, I just want to give a brief synopsis of the film. Both the
As I get down to the thesis paper
yeah,
path, I get the plot and cast laid up.
yeah. So if you just happen to not know, Dumbo, the original 1941 animated film, one of the earlier works from Disney Animation's studio branch. It tells the story of a baby elephant, as we mentioned, who has extremely big ears, and because of that, this poor little baby elephant gets mocked by its elephant peers and also humans and almost everybody except this little mouse who adopts Dumbo under his wing, and they form a sweet little friendship. But the main thrust of the story is mostly Dumbo reconnecting with his mom, who, in a moment of courage and also protecting her young, finds herself in captivity and ultimately away from her son. And throughout this journey, Dumbo finds his self-worth by being able to fly with his ears. And it's just one of those stories where you just kind of, learning to love yourself and accepting yourself and stuff like that. It's a fairly simple message, but as you alluded to, Corey, it has such a sweet innocence, I think, to it, in addition to being also kind of sad and melancholy, that it's like a nice, like, sad sweetness to that film that it's only an hour long, and I think it would be near perfect if it weren't for that terrible stereotyping, as you mentioned, at the book end of it, which really just puts a sour note on what is otherwise such an innocent and pure film. It's a shame, really, and I think that was the main point of interest for a lot of people when it came to remaking this film in 2019, was hopefully having a chance to get rid of that awful profiling and hopefully, keep some of the pure sweetness of the original story intact. Now, if that's successful or not, we mentioned a little bit already, but we'll talk about that more briefly. I just want to say that the live-action Tim Burton version stars Colin Farrell, Michael Keaton, Danny DeVito, Eva Green, and Alan Arkin, in a turn that I was not expecting. I did not know before I saw this film that Alan Arkin was going to be in it, so that was quite a surprise for me. How about you?
It was like he just showed up, and I was kind of like, "Oh, Alan Arkin." And what I like to imagine is like he was shooting a movie next door, and then Tim Burton like ran into him at like the commissary and was like, "Oh, hello, Alan Arkin." He's like, "Hello, Tim Burton."
See,
So
yeah, I thought he like just owed him a favor for something.
yeah,
Because Alan Arkin, like, he is an Oscar winner at this point. I feel like every time he's been asked to do a movie after Little Miss Sunshine, it's kind of like, why? Like, why do I have to do this? It's like, you owe me. Like, oh, fine, just tell me when to show up.
every time you look at him at like an award show, he's kind of like he always has a look of why did I do this?
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be here. Why are these people talking about me? I want to go home. And it's just like
it's past my bedtime. Let me just go home.
yeah, just like look, I am older than you think I am. I just want to go to bed. I appreciate it.
I didn't ask for any of this.
Yeah, seriously. I'm still riding on that vacation money from that movie I did with Zach Braff a few years ago. Like, I really just want to, like, just chill out.
I don't even know what movie that is.
It's like that one where he and Michael Caine and Morgan Freeman, like,
Oh, Going in Style.
yeah, and Zach
Oh.
Braff directed it, and it's like they just, like, rob banks. I don't
Yeah,
know.
no, I remember now. I thought you said Zac Efron, not Zach Braff.
That's right. That Zac Efron's weird auteur phase.
Yeah.
Of his director.
Oh man, that was a weird movie. I should also mention that Nicole Parker and Finley Hobbins. I think those are the names of the kids.
Mhm.
What kind?
Yeah,
That's a kind of curious name, Finland Hobby or Finley Hobbins.
Finley Hobbins. That's like Tim Burton just cast a kill in his name alone. It's like
Yeah.
that works.
Yeah. They're both newcomers. I think this is each of them. It was their first film.
Right on.
Yeah. So I don't know what number live action remake this is. It has to be like what 4 or 5 now.
It's been a bunch. I mean, we've had Cinderella, we've had Beauty and the Beast, Jungle Book, and maybe another one I'm forgetting. But did Cinderella get us kicked off? Or
No, I think Alice in Wonderland was actually the first
yeah,
one, which
that's
was
right.
also directed by Tim Burton. So I guess it's important to note is that this is the first Disney film, I think. Well, no, Frankenweenie was in 2012,
Yeah.
but this is the first live action Disney film that Tim Burton has made since Alice in Wonderland, which, as we were talking about off the air, is a film of little acclaim, at least critically, but it's a film that has proven itself to be the most financially successful of Tim Burton's films by a long shot, and also has formed, I guess, a bit of a small cult following as well. So, Corey, yeah,
Oh, that movie's bad.
yeah, it's terrible. I,
Oh,
I'll talk about my opinions on Tim Burton in a little bit, but first, Corey, I wanted to hear first, how do you generally feel about these live action remakes? Just the nature of them, kind of just going into their vault and remaking all these films, and then tell us how you feel about this new version of Dumbo.
I feel like with these revamps, I guess I feel like I'm almost kind of here nor there on them. I categorically don't like that Disney seems to be completely spurning original content these days. It just feels like as a company, they're trying so hard to pad these investments into other ideas that they're just kind of like, we need to make sure that we're still pulling in these $1-2 billion movies, one or two every year. And it's like, you know, when you make a movie like Dumbo or you bring The Lion King back this summer, they've got Mulan coming, they got Aladdin coming in, uh, I believe it's May, right before Memorial Day. It's just, I mean, they're just safe investments, and they're just like Disney used to like. You look at some of those old animated movies; they used to have teeth, and I feel like Pixar has tons of teeth, or they maybe have begun to kind of wane out just a little bit. But I don't know. It just feels so safe, and it's like the Jungle Book that John Favreau did. It's a perfectly enjoyable movie, but it's just like don't really need it.
Yeah.
It's enjoyable. You watch it. Some people really enjoy it. It's more nostalgia than anything else. It's a new way of telling a story we've heard a million times. And I just feel like that with these movies, it's inevitable. And I feel like it's better invested in stuff like Dumbo because you're kind of going back to like the 40s, and I can understand bringing that back. But
Mm-hmm.
I vehemently don't think we needed the Lion King movie. I don't think we need Aladdin. I just don't think these movies need to exist. But if they're going to exist, they need to not be Beauty and the Beast, because I think Beauty and the Beast is the worst thing Disney has done. And I feel like some of the in like a very long time, and I feel like that and Alice in Wonderland are two of my least favorite Disney movies of the last decade. And it's because they're just soulless. They're made exclusively to get people in, to bring up those cues that recall greater pieces of art from the past. And I feel like, for Disney, who I think in general is a good steward of its IP, it's a good steward of content. Like, I think people are hard on Disney because it's becoming a monopoly. And we'll obviously talk about some of the ironies of that with this film. But I think that by and large, they do a good job of letting artists have a decent amount of freedom. They had some skirmishes here with Star Wars and Marvel, but in general, like, Thor Ragnarok is a Disney movie, and it's like they're still making movies like that. So I try not to be too hard on the studio when they do things that are right. But these movies in particular, I'm just here nor there. They're there, they're going to happen, they're going to make a ton of money. People are going to really enjoy them that aren't me. So, and again, to transition to what I think of this film, I think it's rather agreeable. This, to me, is exactly what I felt mainly when I watched that Jungle Book that Jon Favreau did. I was like, I really enjoyed that. That was a good 2 hours spent. It's not going to shake my world. I don't really know if I'm going to watch it again unless it's on TV and I put it on in the background. Like, it's inessential, but for what it does some things well. And I love Tim Burton, so it's good to see him work on a canvas he obviously puts passion into. I think this film is one he's had visualized in his head for quite some time. There's a very striking sense of visuals with this film, and I think there's a lot of prep and love that went into it, and I think that's the difference, because I think this movie could have been a disaster or just very soulless with its script the way it was, but I think Tim Burton went overdrive to make this as good as he could have and make it as personal as he was, because I think this film is very influential. Going back and watching that 41 film, you can see Tim Burton picking some stuff, especially that Pink Elephant song and some of the more themes of cruelty. They're very Tim Burton things, and I could see him as a kid watching that and being very enamored with it. But he's obviously someone who grew up on Disney films. I mean, how he hovered around that world when he was first getting started. Made Frankenweenie the short for Disney back in the '80s. Like, he's very much of that Disney mold, and I think it's fun to watch him make a good Disney movie. I mean, I love Frankenweenie. I think that's one of his best films. But for live action, like, we can talk more about kind of the intricacies of this one, but I think in general, I really did enjoy it. But I don't think it's perfect. I think it has some pretty obvious problems, but overall, for where the reviews were, I was pretty surprised that I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, when this project was first announced 2 or 3 or maybe 4 years ago, I just remember thinking to myself, like, why Dumbo? Not like why would he feel inclined to make another Dumbo movie, but why was Tim Burton the filmmaker who felt like this is a story he needed to tell? Mm. And as I was watching the film, it kind of made a little more sense to me. I mean, obviously the circus element, like Tim Burton just loves the circus. He also loves to tell stories about like outsiders, kind of like the misfits who don't quite fit into the commercial society. And, just kind of learning to find yourself and stuff like that. Those are very prevalent elements in a lot of Tim Burton's other films, and they're prevalent in this film as well. Now, the problem with this film, I guess, is that the message of the film is about kind of sticking it to the corporation and telling them, like, you can prove to yourself that you can stand on your own 2 legs and kind of make your own act, essentially, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess for Disney to tell that story now, which is about like a couple weeks, maybe even a week or less, after they completed their Fox merger, it feels a little disingenuous or maybe even a bit false to have this message coming from a big Disney movie. It's almost like kind of like they're snidely, like, I don't know. It just feels a little cruel in a way. It just feels cheap and a little dark for them to be telling this message at this point in time. I think that's more of a coincidence as far as the timing is concerned. But at the same time, there is something about a studio like this who is growing increasingly commercial, in that they are acquiring all these different studios and putting them under their house and their brand to have a story that's championing original voices in a remake and all this stuff. It's a little odd to have that message be the main takeaway of the film. I think that might be also why some people are criticizing the film, and I can understand that. Like you're saying, I think there is not a perfect film here. It does have a lot of problems, and I think we'll mention a few of them in a little bit, but I agree with you. I think on the whole, I mean, I haven't really been a big fan of the other live action remakes that we've gotten from Disney thus far. Jungle Book was fine. I thought it was decent. But Beauty and the Beast it just felt so commercial and cynical in a way that you could, I don't know if you could tell beyond studio influence, like who was the filmmaker of that, like what was the commercial drive of that beyond money. I don't like to be cynical in that regard, but it just seems like that movie was made more for the end product, like getting the money out of it, as opposed to any like artistic value to it. And that's a very depressing thought to think. And I like to think that most films are made with some personal or artistic aspirations, but it sometimes feels like these movies are a little more for the end or the bottom line, as opposed to the ultimate artistic integrity. Now, I do think with this film, while I don't know if I felt, compared to some of the other Tim Burton films, that this one had his stamp as often. Like you don't see his, I guess, kind of cliched cinematic touches, or not so cliched in some cases, in here quite as much. But I do think, for as much as people rile against Tim Burton, I will say I like Tim Burton. I feel like he gets a bad rap just because he kind of hires the same people, I guess, a lot, and he has a similar color palette in some of his movies. And he hires Danny Elfman a lot. I don't know. Do you know exactly why people make fun of Tim Burton, Corey?
I think he's an easy target because like his movies are shirts at Hot Topic.
Yeah,
I think his movies attract such an obvious fan base, and they attract such a like a I don't know, just like this angst that sometimes people feel like it's just so cheesy. Like, I mean, you look at he was people just like don't always, I think, acknowledge history as much as they need to. He was an electrifying filmmaker in the late '80s and early '90s. I
oh for
mean,
sure.
Their Hands, Ed Wood, two Batman films, Pee Wee Herman's Big Journey, like
Hmm.
Beetlejuice. Like he was making some really out there stuff, and he really was one of the very first directors that did two things. I mean, he brought the old '50s, B movies, some of that Roger Corman. Like he brought a lot of that to the mainstream, and he also took, I think, and some people had done that very similarly, but he also brought it almost to family audiences. Like, you can't necessarily say like that, David Lynch and John Carpenter, while brilliant filmmakers, at their heyday were adaptable for a wide audience.
Hmm.
Like you couldn't sit your kids down and watch The Thing. Now, maybe you did, and maybe
Yeah.
you're dad, but like I just look at stuff like Edward Scissorhands and Beetlejuice, and those were family friendly almost. I mean, they were a little edgy, and they were edgy enough to be PG-13, but in the Batman films, but you could take your family to that. You could take a kid that was maybe 8, 9 years old and let them be exposed to some darker material that still was palatable. And I think that's been Tim Burton's MO. Now he's done some R-rated work that's been pretty edgy, but
Hmm.
I think he wanted to tell stories for outsiders because I think he always felt like one. And I think early in his career, he did those really well. I mean, Pee Wee Herman's Big Adventure is one of my favorite movies. I think it's brilliant. I think that
Fantastic.
character, it's perfect. I mean, the biker scene, the little callbacks, it's just so much brilliant stuff. The final act, I mean, the bad guy who's obviously very relevant now. It's just like it's great, and I think that what happened to Tim Burton is what happens to a lot of filmmakers like Tim Burton, and he's not any different from a lot of the other people. He just went commercial, and he got more and more opportunities to tell big canvas storytelling, and I think that you can look at something like Planet of the Apes and see him going into an opportunity that he probably wasn't the right person for. He didn't have the right story to tell, and it just like you look at that, and then people who find his films to be easy targets, and I feel like some people look at Tim Burton and say, okay, it's like it's just the hot topic thing. It's like sometimes the fan bases, and again, A Nightmare Before Christmas, a film he produced for Henry Selick at Disney. That film is really good. It's very unique. It's very it's a fascinating dichotomy between the macabre and the innocence of Christmas, and it's well done. But that fan base is obnoxious.
Hmm.
And I think that Tim Burton fans cause people to get sour on Tim Burton movies. And I think that's his central problem is that like he attracts such an obvious, sometimes annoying fan base that, again, everybody knows A Nightmare on Christmas. The merchandise for that is just so it's just aghast of just, it's just corny and just so, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it gives you a certain feeling. And I think that's the problem with Tim Burton is that his movies attract that sort of feeling to them if you kind of put it in the wrong audience. But I think when you just boil down who he is as a filmmaker, I think he is one of the most exciting people in a very anonymous time of filmmaking. The late '80s, early '90s are not like a hotbed. Like we don't have that many great films that came out of that period. Now the early '90s had some really exciting stuff. You began to get into the Sundance craze, and indie filmmaking was really at its nadir. But the '80s are regarded as kind of an anonymous time. Like their sci-fi was in a good place. You had some good niche films, but like for the filmmakers that were coming out of that period, Tim Burton was one of the main ones, and he was one of the ones that had that distinct style. So I think he deserves a lot more respect. I'm a huge Tim Burton fan. I will always show up for what he does. I don't always enjoy it. Some of his movies I really don't like,
Hmm.
but I think he's always a voice that's worth hearing. And I think that's partly why, while I think this is one of his more anonymous works, I can still see him at times very prevalently in this.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I think that's pretty on point. Yeah, there's just something about his films, even some of the weaker ones, that you can still tell, like you're saying, that it's him. Like you can tell that he's the one behind the wheel and that he's the one that's making this film. And sometimes when you have studio films like this, like they can get a little anonymous. And I am a little bummed that this film feels a little more on the anonymous side of Tim Burton's filmography. But I do think there are moments in this film that I think endeared me enough to appreciate what Tim Burton was doing. I think ultimately the first half of the film is a little stronger than the second. Would you agree with that?
Interesting. I kind of think that the film reaches a plateau once Keaton comes into the picture.
Yeah.
And once you enter him to the point where you get to the end of the very first circus performance, I think it hits this like, this is really good type of mode. And it's very at home for him. But then I think it kind of fades out a little bit. I wasn't as enamored with the attempts to remake Dumbo as I was the attempts to, no pun intended, enlarge Dumbo, I guess, in terms of like, telling a new story with it, even though there's some obvious irony. My favorite part of the movie was the very first circus performance. I thought it was riveting.
Sad Dumbo for the win.
That's right. Sad Dumbo for the win.
Sad clown Dumbo.
That's good. Oh no, actually, it's the.
You're thinking of the baby scene. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I jumped too soon.
Oh no, actually, I'm going way in the future. I'm going like the very first circus thing at Dreamland.
Oh, okay. There are a couple of circus scenes, so I get.
That's true. This movie is like 3/4 circus, so it's like, it's very. It's not Circus Anonymous.
Yeah, the only thing it's missing is Andy Circus.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's like a family circus strip flying in the
yeah.
everywhere.
What's that family called? They're in the audience, I guess. I forget what they're called.
Exactly. It's some kids like, Daddy, life lessons.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's like life. But
it's like we don't tell jokes for 40 years.
Exactly. The joke that you continue to keep following along with things that you're seeing in your real life. But
yeah. Anyway, enough trashing the family circus.
Yeah, seriously, that circus needs to leave town already.
Oh man. Okay. Anyway, as you're saying.
Yeah, but it's that scene when you first get into Dreamland, and I guess this is like a minor spoiler, but they don't stay at the main circus. They go to like this theme park. It's like almost like a retro Disney World almost of like just it reminded me of like Disney World mixed with like steampunk Moron Mountain from Space Jam. I don't know why that's what came to my mind, but I remember the layout design for Moron Mountain was almost kind of ominous for a theme park. Like they picked up some like gaudier nature of it, and I think that's what Tim Burton wanted to do because he makes this just lavish set piece of just 1920s teens, just like blow your mind, steal, like
yeah,
just it's like something like William Joyce or the guy that does Roly Poly and all that. Like it's just like something he would have designed because it's just so of that era. But it's like they have this circus scene, and the way that Tim Burton directs it, it's a complete all. It's just like the building tension with the production design and Danny Elfman's score, and it's the very first time Dumbo's flying in front of a big audience, and it's just the way he builds it up. He's just like he has such a reverence for those moment in movies that just swell you and just like grip you by the throat. And I think Tim Burton's always been really good at those. I'm just like wanting to kind of get you to a point where it's like you will be reverent, you will respect this. And I feel weird saying that about the Dumbo movie, but that was a movie where I was kind of rapt for a second. I was like, this is really, really good. And those kind of pan in scenes of like the long shots of like Keaton looking down on his creation and people observing in the audience. And I think that's what Tim Burton values about the cinematic experience is I don't just want to make things that are weird. I want to make things that are wild. I want you to really feel that sense of awe. And I feel like that's how he approaches movies. It's how a lot of people approach movies. And I love that in commentary that entertainment does sometimes. It comments on the nature of how entertainment makes you feel. And it was just such a great moment. And I just loved that when Tim Burton got his teeth into that storyline, which I think is one of the big reasons he wanted to tell the story. But everything else, it kind of tapers back out. I don't think the family story is that strong. And it's just kind of like the frustrating parts of him mixed in with the parts of him that made him so great to begin with.
For sure. I agree with that. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think I guess that'd be the first 2/3 are really where the movie kind of flies or it soars, I guess.
Yeah.
It's just, it's just unfortunate that that last act where you just see kind of where you see from the beginning where it's going to go, but or at least once that second act starts. But like when it really just comes into play, like you know what's going to happen. It just feels like you're just kind of what's the term? Like you're just kind of like waiting it out until the end. Like you
Yeah,
just
it's just like you're biding your time.
right, yeah, there you go. And like the climax, it's fine. It just feels very serviceable. Like it just
Sure.
feels like Tim Burton on autopilot at that point. Like he's like, I did what I wanted to do. Let's just wrap this up so you guys can go home. You know, the kids are getting restless. Let's just finish this going. And that's a bummer because I mean, like, there's so much about the first two acts. I agree with you that I think is so winning and endearing that to have it just kind of end on a whimper there for the last act just it does take the steam out a little bit, especially because it focuses so much on these emotional crux with the human characters, which I guess ultimately, for me at least, weren't really there. I mean,
No.
I think Colin Farrell, he's fine in this. I think he's been better certainly. I think his acts in this is a little questionable, which is surprising because he's been usually pretty good about his accents. But how do you feel about that one, Corey?
I the human element didn't get me, especially the family, because I
Yeah,
felt that Aaron Kruger, who I thought did a good job of writing certain characters in this. Like I really appreciated what he did with Mike Keaton's character. I thought it was an interesting read on the kind of crooked visionary almost.
yeah.
Or
We should mention that it's pretty apparent that they're poking fun or they're studying, I guess, P.T. Barnum or late period P.T. Barnum when he's
yeah,
kind of after the Greatest Showman period of his life, if he was ever really at that point, because I think that movie's mostly fictional. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely yeah, like the corporate corrupt man who is kind of like a snake oil salesman who's like selling this promise that he's not going to fulfill. He's just going to kind of like take your land and not really care what happens to you
mhm.
kind of guy. And yeah, we've seen that before, but I think I agree with you that Keaton's performance is what kind of makes it a little more interesting, just mainly because it's Keaton's first time working with Tim Burton in I think almost 30 years, right?
Yeah, it's been a long time. Like I think this is the first time since Batman
Yeah,
Returned.
long overdue. Yeah, and then that's also fun because we mentioned that Danny DeVito's in the film, and they
Yeah.
switch. Danny DeVito's like the good guy in this, and Michael Keaton's obviously the villain. So it's kind of a bit of a ironic turn of events, given that their last collaboration was Batman Returns. But yeah,
It's just like, and again, we'll talk about DeVito, who I think is great in this.
oh yeah,
But
he's fantastic always. But
oh yeah, and I just didn't. The family storyline to me was just so spelled out, and it was just so obvious because obviously maternal loss is such a huge part of that first Dumbo movie.
mhm.
It's a huge part of a lot of the early Disney films. That's a very common thread. I think that Walt Disney understood the pangs of adolescence missing a mother's influence. I mean, you have like the scene in Bambi that is so tragic. You have the Lost Boys who don't have their mom with them. Like, you can kind of hop around and see Pinocchio doesn't have that maternal influence on him. Like, it's a very common theme to me in a lot of the early Disney movies. And I feel like in this movie, it's just so shoehorned in that the kids just say over and over again, I miss my mom, or I don't have
Right.
a mom. And it's just like the Danny DeVito's like, oh, these kids don't have a mom here. Colin Farrell's like, I miss your mother. It's like, all right. Like I feel like it was just so that they were just written into the movie to have some sort of a placebo to keep Dumbo like levied with having some people around him to kind of like be like,
Mhm.
"Hello, Dumbo," or "Let's give you." They just felt like kind of plot points and plot devices that kind of help move the story along as opposed to actual characters. And obviously, there's a potent idea in place. And the most frustrating thing that I look back is that Colin Farrell's character, they create this fascinating, a one-armed veteran coming back from World War One to kind of this single dad life of raising these two kids in a circus, and he's very insecure that he doesn't have an arm. He has a really bad kind of like fake arm that he carries around. He has some like worries there. And then you have like Dumbo, who is like physically deformed too, with the big ears, of course. And there's like one moment where Colin Farrell like gets invested in the fact that he feels bad for Dumbo because he can relate, but the film never explores it past that. And the whole movie is just like Colin Farrell goes back to being a plot point. And
Yeah.
that's like there was such rich thematic stuff there that if they'd given that relationship a lot more, maybe had him be more of a trainer for Dumbo as opposed to the two kids who don't really do anything. And no offense to those children, I'm so happy they got a break, but
Yeah.
it just felt like such a missed opportunity and such a because obviously the movie you don't show up to see the humans, you show up to see the little baby elephant. But
Right.
I think that that was one of the grand faults of this film is that like you had opportunity here to deepen this and enrich this and tack some things on that really could have been more potent, but you chose more to focus on the spectacle and the feel, which I respect. It has some really great moments of that, but it just kind of leaves you more entertained than I guess thought provoked.
Yeah, I mean, like stuff like that, I can kind of see like the boardroom meeting, I guess, for this movie with Tim Burton and Disney executives. Like they're like, "Well, are we gonna have animals talking like we did with Jungle Book?" Like, no, I'm not about that. We don't have animals talking in my movies.
No.
Like, all right, we'll have some human characters. And he's like, we always have single parents because we can't have just two parents in our movies. It's like, why don't we do something like where it's like two moms, like the kids have a mom, and like they kind of Dumbo has a mom's like, no, how am I gonna air out my daddy issues? It's like, well, okay.
It's like a back and forth. All right, guys, we're gonna
Yeah,
break for lunch. We'll get back to the more of
right.
the personal like, after this.
Yeah,
Same thing, get some autographs done. Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think there is something there, especially with Colin Farrell's character and what his relationship to Dumbo could have been. It just seems like they wanted to either have it through the eyes of the children or through Colin Farrell. It felt like two different ideas that were kind of half baked. Like you gotta pick one or the other, I guess. Like you either have to focus more on Colin Farrell or more on the kids. And I think I personally would have preferred maybe the Colin Farrell approach, just because I don't think these kids are bad, but they just feel like blank slates in the film. Like I
yeah.
really like the girl tells us constantly she's into science. Like she loves science. She wants to be a scientist. She's all about science. Could you tell me one thing about the boy character? Like anything.
He was not as tall as his sister.
That's true. Yeah, he was younger, I guess.
Yeah, he was not. He wore a hat.
Did he wear overalls?
I think so.
Yeah.
He serves no purpose in this film.
Yeah, there's just nothing to that character. I could honestly not tell you like anything beyond his appearance, who he was, what he wanted out of life.
Let me read the Wikipedia.
Yeah.
This is the best I could come up with. I didn't know his name was Joe. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Obviously, his dad's name was Holt.
Right.
Holt's enthusiastic son.
Yeah.
All they could really do is just get a general adjective. It's like sometimes he looks excited in a movie, and it's like, all right, well, I guess we just use that in the description. Like, good for the PR team for trying to find something, but yeah, I think that's the disappointing part of this is that and I feel like this is a good time to transition to talk about DeVito because I think he's
well, I was just gonna say, I mean, with the kids, what I find disappointing about is that like Tim Burton generally has been pretty good about finding the inner life of children characters.
he has.
What was that?
Yeah, no, he totally has. Like Miss Peregrine's, it was like his last movie was like mainly a child cast.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you just see these films that he's done. You know, Frankenweenie we mentioned. I would argue Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, though that movie is not without problems. I think the way it depicts Charlie is usually pretty good. You just have like these films where obviously he has like a type, like the outsider artistic kid. But just seeing this film where he usually is able to give his child protagonist a little more life and investment, and therefore kind of have that reflected into your experience of film and the way you kind of perceive the film. It just seems very, very lacking to have these characters just basically be nothing, yet having to be the crux of like the carrying the emotional part of the film away from Dumbo's like relationship with his mom, which I think in the scheme of things with the human characters gets overlooked, unfortunately.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, which I think is a big, big problem with the film. But anyway, yeah, let's waste no more time and finally talk about Danny DeVito, who, as you said, is fantastic in this film.
Actually, fun fact, Nico Parker, who plays Millie in the film, the girl we were talking about, do you know who her mom is?
Nicole Parker?
Thandie Newton.
Thandie Newton, okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
Fascinating.
Yeah, how about that?
Good for Thandie Newton's kid. That's old Nico's finally making her way in the world.
Oh man. But anyway, Danny DeVito.
Yes, always.
All right. So was there something in particular you wanted to talk to about him, or just that he's just fantastic in general? Because I have some notes, but I want to hear from you first.
I mean, I just think he's one of our really underappreciated actors. Like, I think he found that niche on It's Always Sunny for a better part of a decade, and I think he was happy there, and he didn't really want to do a whole lot. And I think that lots of movies kind of went past him and didn't really know what to do with him for certain things. Like, he's only done 2 movies since joining the cast of It's Always Sunny. He did Todd Solond's Wiener Dog, and then that Michael Keaton film Solitary Man, which
Oh, okay, which is actually really good. I like that one a lot.
interesting. Okay, I haven't seen that, but he's his filmography is obviously he was a major actor in the 90s, very late 80s, or the whole 80s, 90s, and early thousands. But
Yeah.
he just did It's Always Sunny, found a very happy niche there, I guess. And this is his first major motion picture role since really like in a major studio release since 2006's Deck the Halls, which was
Oof, which
obviously
is
not a
terrible.
good movie. Yeah, like not a good
Yeah.
movie at all. So I mean, this is his big return to movie making, and I think that he's great in the movie, and he's just so well cast in that role, and it's just great to see him back because DeVito is just such an original actor. Nobody really could do what he did, and he's so great in Tim Burton stuff. Like when they would work together, like it's so great to see them back together because he has not done a Tim Burton film since Big Fish. So I think that's one of the really good aspects of this movie is that DeVito's there. He's very well cast, and he's able to really kind of flex into what he's great at.
Yeah, I mean, just continuing off to that point, I think one of the reasons I was actually looking forward to this film a little more than most people was just not only for Danny DeVito finally working with uh, Tim Burton, and also Michael Keaton returning to work with Tim Burton, but also we have Eva Green working with Tim Burton again for the third time. And I think Eva Green and Tim Burton have been doing some great work together with Dark Shadows and Miss Peregrine. I don't think those films are great. I actually don't like Dark Shadows all that much, but I think she feels like she's giving a new energy to Tim Burton in
Yeah.
a lot of his films of late, and I think that that's kind of needed. I think it also gives a femininity that has been absent from a lot of his films. And I'm a little bummed that she hasn't gotten a lead role yet. I guess Miss Peregrine was pretty close, but it was ultimately another child protagonist. What's his name? The Ender's Game kid.
He's
But
yeah.
yeah, there you go. But this film, yeah, she's fine. It's just our character is very, very underwritten. But you were saying that off the air that you didn't think it was that good of a performance from her, though.
Yeah, it's just kind of like I don't know. I feel like it got a little bit better as it went on. And I think she's a very good actress in general, and obviously has that rapport with Burton. But I don't know. I just felt like that. This is just another part of the problem with the script is that the characters didn't have anything that the actors couldn't give them. And I felt like some of those characters were just so wooden that it was like the actors really couldn't do anything that the page wouldn't let them do.
Yeah.
Like that, DeVito and Keaton, and at some points Farrell, they had opportunities to flex around a little bit, but like Farrell's stuck in the accent, Eva Green is stuck in her accent, she's supposed to be French. Like, there's just only so much these characters could do that the actors could maybe give them some nuances, but I don't know. It's just more not really bad, but it's really forgettable.
Yeah, I'm ultimately more favorable on her in this film than you because I think ultimately it's another example, like we were saying, that her character feels like half developed or half baked at this point. She's our kind of another endearing look at Dumbo, where she kind of grows to love the character the way the other characters do, and that's fine. But that's like the third time that's happened in the film. It's like we all love Dumbo, but how many scenes we're gonna have our characters fall in love with Dumbo?
Yeah,
Uh, you
it's like
know,
the scene where Homer is trying to do the pitch for Poochie. It's
oh
like,
yeah.
who? Let's see, who
Is
people
it
need to
Is it no wait no Pookie's Garfield's pet. No, you're right, Poochie. Yeah.
Poochie versus Pookie. He's like, where's Dumbo? Why aren't people talking about
Yeah,
Dumbo?
yeah, of course, yeah. Any scene where Dumbo's on the scene, we have to ask, "Where's Dumbo?"
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's just I think she does well with the part. I think she proves like she has great physicality in all of her parts. I think that's apparent here as well. I
mm,
think she brings a great life to a lot of her roles. I think what she's doing here is fine. It's just unfortunate that her character is another. It's not a blank slate compared to the kids, but it just feels a little empty. Like there's something there. It needs to have something more to it. And that's like you're saying. That's something that's ultimately kind of frustrating with this film is that you can see that there's a pretty good film in here. There's a decent film maybe, but there's a great or good film in here that could have come out. It just feels like they kind of like went to lunch a little too early. Like there's just something in the screenwriting process or something with the storytelling there's an extra step that's missing here, and that's just unfortunate. But anyway, I went off from what we should have been talking about earlier, which is Danny DeVito,
Mm.
and goodness me, I can't agree more with you. It just he is fantastic. I really think he's one of my favorite actors. I think he is one of our greatest actors. Just that he brings so much life and versatility to each role, and he can be funny and very serious in any given moment. And there's something that I think would annoy me that he spends half the movie kind of doing like antics with a monkey,
That's true.
like that keeps like going into like his drawer and stuff. But at the same time, DeVito sells it, man. Like
He does.
yeah, it's just so he makes it work. Although I have to ask, and did you notice this at the beginning of the film? The opening shot, that the train, they show a picture of two Danny DeVitos, right?
Hmm.
And my thought process, I'm going berserk in my brain. I'm like, are we gonna get two Danny DeVitos in this one movie?
Life can never be that good, Will.
I
mean,
know it's just that they promise it.
they do. It's just like a cruel tease.
Yeah, it's like, why would you even give me that? Why would you give me that thought if you're not going to deliver on it? Like, I just kept waiting and waiting. I'm like, I think that's what fueled me through the third act. I was like, maybe that second Danny DeVito is going to finally show up at the end and be like, is there a circus in town? Did I hear something about a flying elephant? And it's like, brother.
It's like by now, if that didn't work out, and the Danny DeVito movie, literally called Twins, doesn't feature two Danny DeVitos, I don't know if it's ever gonna happen.
Yeah, I don't know. Oh well.
I know life can only be so sweet.
Yeah, but I think it's a good point as any to provide our final thoughts on Dumbo. We went a little longer than I anticipated, but that's all right. I think we had a good conversation.
Honoring the size of his beautiful ears, we're gonna have to be a little bit bigger than we normally are. And
that's true. Yeah. Corey, provide some of your final thoughts on the film and what letter grade you give it.
I think it's an enjoyable family film. It's much better. I kind of went in with very low expectations because I'd seen the reviews. It kind of seemed pretty moribund. Like some people enjoyed it, some people didn't. But I think it was Bill Jabiri that was like, "This movie is in equal parts like enthralling and frustrating." And I think that's a great way to put it, or kind of paraphrasing what he said. Like, I think it's a good movie. I think it's a movie that has some very untapped potential. I think it's a movie that occasionally reaches that potential. I think it's a movie that kind of at times squanders that potential, and I think that's just where Tim Burton is as a filmmaker right now. I think he still has a great movie in him. I still think he can, if he finds the right material, he can still tell a great story. But I think that this movie is just, I'd give it, I would say a BB minus. I think it kind of teeters around that. It has some highs that would make me even go a little bit higher if that were the whole movie, but I think it's just kind of what it is. It's a nice, charming film. I think it detaches itself from the original in ways that are wise and in ways that aren't so wise. So, I appreciate the opportunity for Burton to be able to tell this story. I think it was one that was personal to him. I think he was able to take a movie that influenced him, and I think he was having a blast in that balloon scene where he was like the bubbles where he was doing the pink elephant.
Oh yeah, which we didn't even talk about. That was a great scene.
It was a great scene,
and I love that they cutting back to Dumbo's reaction. That was like the same reaction like 4 times. But it was just so cute. Like he was just so enamored with these pink elephants, just nodding along. Like,
holy cow, that shot where the pink elephants kind of disappear, and it's just that still shot of the light leaving Dumbo's eye.
Yeah,
and it was really good, and it kind of transitions back to where the circus is because he's now the main attraction. Like, I thought that was riveting. I think that's why I love that scene so much.
Yeah, that's definitely the most Burton-esque scene in the film. Yeah, it's definitely like the most like. When you thought in your brain, like, what is Tim Burton's Dumbo going to be? That's where that scene really, like, proves, like, oh, yeah, this is what you had in mind, I think. So, yeah, I guess for me, I don't know what it is about this movie. Like, I kept thinking, like, when I was writing the review for the website, I was like, what am I going to say about Dumbo? And I wrote, like, 2,000 words about it. This conversation, I was like, what are we going to say about Dumbo? We went on for, like, 40 minutes talking about this movie. So I don't know what it is about this film, but I end up having a lot to say about it. However, I do agree with you. I think it's ultimately just somewhere down the middle. It's kind of a forgettable film for him, I think, in the scheme of things. Not right now, but I think in like a week or two, I don't see myself thinking too much about Dumbo or really having too much of my mind about Dumbo. I think it serves its purpose. I agree with you that I think it's a little more personal than people are giving it credit for in some critical circles, but there's highs in this movie and there are lows, and I think the highs are high enough that it's a redeemable enough experience, but the lows are so frustrating and annoying that you just feel like, why couldn't someone just do this a little better? Why couldn't Tim Burton get his act a little bit better and like make a good film here as opposed to just a serviceable decent one? But ultimately, I do think there's a little more warmth and sincerity here than you see in, like you said, the last Beauty and the Beast film or whatever other live action remake that I'm forgetting about right now. Yeah, I think it's ultimately a B minus film. It's just serviceable enough to the point where I don't think it's quite B territory, but I would be remiss if it's C plus territory because I think there's just good stuff in here. And I think ultimately, if general audiences come to see it, Tim Burton fans or not, they're probably going to get a good time. I think younger audiences are probably going to get the most out of this film. Mm-hmm. Just because they probably aren't familiar with like the kind of tropiness. They're not going to probably think too much about how the message can be a little false given that it's from Disney. So yeah, I think it's ultimately a decent film, and I think it's not doing too well at the box office right now.
Interesting. It was like a 170 budget, so that's
yeah, it cost a pretty penny. And I didn't end up looking at the box office results for it yet, but I just remember hearing that. Oh, let's see. It looks like it grossed 45 million so far, which isn't bad.
They'll make it back internationally. Like, I mean, you'll get your investment back, but it just may not be a huge grosser.
Yeah, it's about 116 worldwide, so I think it'll probably break even at least.
Yeah,
it'll do okay. But yeah, I don't think it's quite the Alice in Wonderland hit that Disney was hoping for.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what they wanted, and that's what they didn't get.
But oh well. Corey, are you ready to talk about the beach film?
I am. I'm scared we're going to spend longer on this than Dumbo.
You know what? You know, John's not here. We can talk about this movie as long as we want.
That's right. Time is only a mere construct when it comes to the beach film.
Yeah. But anyway, did you want to go and describe what this film's about, or do you want me to do it?
I can do my best, I guess.
I was going to say, I don't want to put you in a tough spot, but if you have a fair description of the film, I'd be happy to hear it.
It is about a hedonistic beach bum that is also somehow like this. I called him like the Corona King.
That's good.
And like this movie, it's like if you took the Wolf of Wall Street and made him to be the Jordan Belfort of Margaritaville. I think that this character is like this guy who just goes around all day, and it's like a character in a Jimmy Buffett song.
Yeah.
But Harmony Korine like doesn't exactly want to excuse this character, and is pretty critical of it throughout because this guy is just he's so hedonistic and so world weary and so let the good times roll, and it's basically like just like a beach meme almost, like one of those stupid like things you see on Facebook people share about the beach because it's like beach culture enwrapped into this big
life's a beach kind of guy.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like I have no consequences, and he's also like probably a millionaire, so he's incredibly financially secure. He's this famous author who writes these like stoner wisdom. Just it's like he's like the emperor of new clothes almost.
Well, there's a very much like a dude element to it where he just kind of slacks around, and the dude is also rich for kind of mysterious and unclear reasons.
And he's like detached from the dude because the dude is like empathetic and he cares about the people around him. And the beach bum Moondog, as he's called, Matthew McConaughey's character, he just doesn't really care. He's kind of like he doesn't hate anybody, but he doesn't really like. He's really out for himself and what makes him happy and all the people in his life.
He's a wanderer. He just kind of he gets what he wants out of people, but when push comes to shove and they want something serious or they are in like a moment of personal crisis, he's like, well, that's my time to skedaddle. And so
exactly. Yeah. He's just kind of like, I wish you well, but I need to go, smoke weed and hang out on the beach.
I got a life to live on my own.
Exactly. I'm a beach bum after all. I'm not a lifesaver.
Yeah.
Which part of the beach culture do you want me to fill here, buddy? But yeah, and the movie's just like this misadventures that he goes on, and it kind of weaves this theme together that he doesn't really have to answer to anyone, but life begins to kind of happen still, and you still have to see the consequences of what it's like to live a life like this in a very kind of abstract way. And this feels like it's a very this is not a real person, and you wouldn't really actually see real life unfold like this. But I think that's just part of Harmony Korine, the writer director, his surreal look at the world. And it's just like, I think it's a dark movie for a movie that I think that, has a lot of whimsy to it, and, good timey, everybody's having a blast, party atmosphere. But I think it's very melancholic, and it's a character study about who Moondog is, and McConaughey, who just goes 120% into this role and is just fantastic in it. But at the same time, this is a movie this is like, taking a spoonful of tobacco in your mouth. This is supposed to taste bad. And it's funny. It can be very fascinating, but I think that Korine's films, he doesn't exactly want you to leave feeling good. Obviously, I think I appreciate his filmmaking a lot for what I've seen, but he's really taking the latter part of his career and is focusing on this Florida party culture. I think is this fascinating microcosm for where we are right now. And I know you don't necessarily agree with that always, but I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I should say right off the bat, I'm not really a fan of Harmony Korine, which I guess surprises people because I've talked to people and I've mentioned that and they're like, we would have thought you've been a huge fan of Harmony Korine. I don't know what that says about me or people I hang out with, but yeah, I should mention that this is the follow-up film to Spring Breakers, which came out, I believe, 6 years ago now.
Yep, 2013.
Yeah, and that's a film where, at that point, Harmony Korine, he got to start on the very, very indie scene. He kind of wanted to get into that Werner Herzog phase where he did movies like Gummo, Julian Donkey Boy, and films of that where
screenplay for Larry Clark's Kids.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, he wrote that apparently in 19.
Wow.
Yeah, he got to start very early into the game, and he had kind of that punk attitude, that kind of punk rock attitude to filmmaking, where a lot of his earlier films don't really have structure to them. They're just kind of slice of life, scenes in people's lives, and they're usually kind of impoverished people who are just kind of not great characters, but they have these stories, they have these kind of particular worldviews that I think he cares to an extent about his characters, but there's something kind of cruel about his earlier films that, I don't know, they just rub me the wrong way. And I just feel like he wants to say something in his earlier films, but I never get the sense that he's actually saying anything, but he wants to give the impression that he is saying something, and people kind of perceive different things that may or may not be there. But I do agree with you that I think there's something to this film, particularly about Harmony Korine as a person, that I think kind of shines throughout, and I think that's what makes me like this film a little bit more than Spring Breakers, where that film, I do agree that, obviously the intention of the film, it's kind of they're trying to sell you on scantily clad women, and Spring Break, it's going to be a Van Wilder type comedy, and then you watch it, and it's this commentary on youth culture and kind of this Spring Break mentality and stuff, and to me, that felt a little pretentious.
Interesting.
Yeah, I just felt it just felt so obvious to me, with Selena Gomez characters Faith, and then she leaves, and so they lose Faith, and I don't know, it wasn't my scene. But I think that film was better than his other films because you could see the early signs of what would become a film like Beach Bum, where to me, I don't know if you saw this film, but Mr. Lonely is my personal favorite Harmony Korine film, and I think the reason why I like that is because it feels less like him trying to comment on different characters and more just him reflecting upon himself. And that film where that film is about a Michael Jackson impersonator who kind of falls in line with these other impersonators, and he just kind of goes on this island misfit toys where everyone's just kind of doing their thing. And that kind of felt like him, where he was kind of going into the scene based on his influences, and obviously, like we said, Herzog and a couple others. where he's just kind of fitting to this like art house scene. And to this film, I think in some ways it feels like commentary on like him approaching middle age, where he had like this kind of like earlier rambunctious childhood. If you don't know, he got like banned on David Letterman because he like looked through Meryl Streep's purse or something like that. He has kind of a history as an earlier in his earlier career, but I think with this film, he's kind of looking inward and realizing that, like he's going to get older. Like he is at middle age right now. And, the party is still going to be going on elsewhere, with like the Zac Efron characters of the world. But his Moondog is not going to be rocking the same way. And even if he is, there's going to be a melancholy there. There's going to be an inherent sadness to that because, like, is this character ever going to grow up and kind of learn from his ways, or is he just going to kind of continue to spout like his like mumbo jumbo, like self-satisfied views of the world? And I guess that's what I took out of the film, and I feel like you agree and disagree with that notion just based on what I read from your review on Letterboxd.
Corey to me is really interesting because like he's one of ours in Nashville. He's
Okay.
a
I didn't
Nashvilleian.
realize he was from there.
Well, I don't know if he was born here, but he lives here and he's like been around here for a long time. He's interesting because like the Nashville Scene was one of the publications I write for. He has a history with that publication. Like they've done lots of features on him. He was really close with Jim Ridley, who was the longtime editor and critic there.
Oh yeah,
Passed away at 16. Corey actually wrote one of the people. He was one of the people that eulogized Ridley, one of the many that kind of published something when he passed. Like so, he knew who he was, and like it's just so fascinating to me. I remember when the Spring Breakers came out, it was just such a huge deal in Nashville because like this is one of our local guys that had done good in a big way because it was like a big release and had a lot of big stars in it, and it was the biggest thing he had done so far in his career. And I had not seen it until this past winter, and that's one of my favorite films of the decade.
Wow,
it is brilliant. I think it's a horror film. I think it's terrifying. I think the opening scene where he puts Skrillex over the partiers is like one of the scariest things I've seen in a very long time. And again, like, I don't know. Do you go to the beach a lot?
Not particularly, no.
This is, to me, I think Corrine is a regional filmmaker, and I think he speaks some Southern truths that, like, I've seen a lot growing up because we would go to the beach every summer to Destin, Florida, and you just get a sense of this beach culture that takes hold, especially I think of people in the Southeast. And like that's what was so fascinating to me about Spring Breakers is like, I mean, I think those characters were more anonymous for they can come from anywhere, but it's like they're going down to Florida and they're kind of taking this Panama City Beach approach. Just I'm going to do whatever I want to. I have no consequences. I'm going to trash the world and feel what I want to feel. And it just I think that's the brilliance of Spring Breakers is it's just like he's like trying to like point out this emptiness that is really kind of creating a cavity in I think America's youth. And I think that this film almost feels like Spring Breakers for baby boomers or Gen Y. Like this is that generation's version of what they view. And I think that like having been around like seeing like Margaritavilles everywhere when you go out of town and like Jimmy Buffett, who's in this movie, I don't know why, because I think Corey is basically saying his music is like this Pied Piper of just terrible people. But I don't know. I felt
wow.
Yeah,
I didn't realize you had such strongly negative opinions about Jimmy Buffett.
I like Jimmy Buffett in terms of like I think his music's kind of harmless, but I think the culture around it's kind of like almost like Tim Burton, like. It's fine, like, and I think that his music is it's just beach music. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with it, but like the people that listen to it and create this culture,
who obsess over it in a way.
It's like, and to me, this is this idea of privilege in terms of it's hedonistic privilege. It's life's a beach, and I want to go to the beach, and it's just like your whole life is built around this idea that I want to seek pleasure, and I don't have to be answered for what I do, and I'm a privileged old white person, so. I'm not going to have to answer for a lot anyway. And I think Moondog in the film, like he escapes from rehab at one point, like he breaks multiple laws, and like in this world, it's like Moondog's never going to get in trouble. And I think the film like shows that he has consequences left and right, but he never really feels it. And I think that my letterbox, I think sometimes sums up my ideas better than I do on paper. But it's like he's trying to like look at this Florida party culture as like a jagged kaleidoscope for what ails us right now. And he's like, but he's not gonna give you a solution either. I think he's like trying to show that like he's like one of these apathetic salt life millionaires who piss away meaning and morality while the bills burns and people suffer. And I feel like this film is like it's like his response to Trumpism. I think this is his response to this is how we got to where we got is because there are these people that are so amoral and so caught up with themselves and what makes them happy that they don't consider the world around them. And I think that Moondog is it reminded me a lot of the Wolf of Wall Street. Like he's just this guy that goes around selling just bullcrap wisdom and riling these people up to think he's like this really cool hip guy. And in reality, he's a loser. He sits around and drinks all day. There's this line in it that Jonah Hill has, and it's right towards the end of the movie, and I think it sums it up. And he's like this obviously well affluent lawyer, like
Yeah,
type.
he's a very strange character to me. It just
Yeah.
yeah, but we'll talk about it in a bit. Go ahead.
But like he just says something like the best part of being rich is that I can hurt people without any consequences. And I was like, oh my gosh, like if you want to just say your theme out loud, that's what it was. And
Right, which is a problem that I typically have with Korean movies. I feel like he just blatantly says what he thinks the film is about out loud to the point where I just feel like he is either just I just sometimes feel like he doesn't really have respect for his audience in some ways. Like he's like, do I need to tell you what my movies are about? But that's again, that's me being petty, I guess. But sorry.
No, I think that's a very valid concern. I just, for some reason, it's like I've lived in this world. I guess having like my feet in the soil almost helps me see the worms. I guess and I feel like it felt so real to me because like as crazy as these characters are, it's like you can see them. You can see that because Moondog couldn't vote. I mean, I think this is the point of the movie is like these characters still have large impacts on the world in negative ways. And I think for a filmmaker that at times I think very validly can be questioned in terms of what's your intention? What are you trying to say? Is this really just a big joke to you? But I think he's a much more introspective and I think really empathetic and concerned filmmaker, at least at this point in his career, because he's made 2 films about Florida party culture that have dug deep into 2 separate generations and exactly what, this longing for meaning and purpose and feeling that these kids in Spring Breakers have that, at the end of the day, they're just as lost as anybody else. And they really are not as scary, but that makes them more scary. It's like they don't have any malevolence in them at the end of the day, but that makes them even more malevolent. And it's like this movie is just like these characters are just so world weary and just so apathetic and interesting of chasing good times that they become even more dangerous since they care less and less and less. So it's like apathy becomes in and of itself the most potent thing to care about. So I think that I really, really liked this movie. It made me very uncomfortable because it's just like it doesn't offer you much of a solution or any sort of respite. And I think that's why I respect him as a filmmaker is that he doesn't offer you the easy way out. He doesn't offer you a negotiated tactic. He's going to say what he wants to say. He's going to tell it how he wants to tell it. And if you like it or not, that's going to be your business. But I don't know. I'm proud of him to come out of the region and tell these stories. And I need to catch myself up with his earlier work. I don't know if I would adapt to it as much since you kind of described the type of movies I don't typically enjoy. It was kind of in your face. It's kind of, degradation of youth. Like I'm usually not on those. It's only Mr. Lonely's nice, but I don't know. I think that for at least what I'm familiar with the latter part of his career, he seems to be a filmmaker who has his tab on his region and what ails it. And I really am enamored with that.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you and I don't, I think, in a lot of ways, but I think the way you describe his film is really spot on. And I think there are undeniable strengths to Corinne as a filmmaker. I think even the films of his I don't particularly like and might even hate in some regards, they do stick with me. They linger in a way that I think is a credit to him in that he knows exactly how to give like the atmosphere of each location to stand out. Like the locations of every one of his films, like I can see them almost vividly. Like they just stick out. Like the houses, like the location, the art set design of them, like the very particular in certain ways that are very memorable. And just the set pieces stand out quite a bit. And I also think that he does even when his films aren't always pretty, they're like his earlier works, like they do have a distinct visual style that can feel like very intimate, and it just gets you very close into these characters that may not always be people you want to hang out with or people you would be particularly enamored by, but they do linger with you. He does have a strong sense of character too. So I don't know. I have a very, I guess, mixed relationship as a viewer to Harmony Korine. I do think ultimately that The Beach Bum is one of his stronger efforts. I do think, for me, when he gets more personal, when he speaks a little more from the heart as a writer, I think that stands out to me a little more than when he's trying to make a broad statement like in Spring Breakers. Now, with that said, I don't see this film having the same commercial appeal as Spring Breakers, just by design. Like, I think in some ways that he's like kind of going against that, and he's also kind of responding to it in this way. Like, I think Moondog's like desire to make the next tone poem is kind of a commentary on him trying to figure out how exactly am I going to follow up Spring Breakers. Like, I never expected to make a film like this big. Like, right, yeah, like what's my follow up going to be? I think they channels that in some ways with Moondog. Like, I think his like aspirations to like make this next great either tone poem or novel, he keeps going back and forth. I remember like he like sometimes suggests like he's gonna make a novel, sometimes he wants to make like a collection of poems, and I think when you ultimately hear his writing, it's like it just, you know, like self-celebratory, masturbatory, like you said, mantras basically. Like barely even poetry. So yeah, I don't know. I'm lingering with the film. But it is sticking with me, and I do think McConaughey's performance is just stellar. I really think this is like top tier, top 5 performances from Matthew McConaughey. It seems kind of easy, I guess, because it just seems like a role that's catered for his sensibilities and his talents.
But he like has to work to make you understand like just like the danger, and it's just like he has to like show the pain that a lot of people I don't want to think read into this character. It's like you almost want to find a new dude to latch on to, but I think that McConaughey is like, no, this guy is like not a good person. Like he
not all right.
No, he's not all right.
I do like that the movie, like, it knows that it's expecting you to have that line at some point in this film. So they give it to Martin Lawrence.
Who is great in here.
Yeah, Martin Lawrence, I didn't want to say too much because I think, like, I guess some people don't know he's in this, so I didn't know if it's a spoiler to say he's in it.
He's a delight.
But he's great, yeah. This is like his first role in like his first film role in like 9 years or something, 8 years.
Yeah. And he like sells it, and he's got the funniest part in the movie.
Yeah, the funniest and the darkest, maybe. Well, maybe second darkest.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's such a great moment, and I don't want to spoil it at all because I really think that's one of the better surprises in the film. It's that particular moment. So I think there's
this, and he's good.
What was that?
I like Zac Efron in this a lot too.
Yeah, I should note that he's not in the movie as much as I think the advertising suggests. No. They like kind of sell him to be like the second lead. He has like basically a glorified cameo, like 10 minutes of screen time, I think. Isla Fisher's pretty good. I think Snoop Dogg is actually one of the better performances in here. And I do like that he had a little duet with Jimmy Buffett because just like, why not?
Life's short.
Yeah.
These characters.
Yeah, I wanted to go more into this, but I feel like we might be diving into spoiler territory pretty soon.
Yeah.
I will say, I do really appreciate what you're saying about the film, and I think, you know, sometimes I give Harmony Korine a bad rap, and I do think that he probably has more going on than I give him credit, but at the same time, I do often feel like he's just kind of, what's a PG version, like messing with us in a lot of ways. I just feel like the sincerity of his works can often be debated. And I think the ending of this film definitely feels like a middle finger to anybody who like takes his work seriously.
Interesting. I think it's a cap. I think it's like a cap. I think it's like the exclamation point almost. Like,
I guess you could read it that way, I think, but I don't know, just like that scene and then like the book reading scene just feels like you know, yeah, whatever, like, you know, I like sticking it to the audience, I feel like is the way I perceived it. But at the same time, like you said, like there's that scene with Jonah Hill where he like kind of explains the thesis of the film, and I get what I think I ultimately appreciate what Harmony Korine is doing here a little more than I usually do, but I just do sometimes wonder if like we put a little more stake into his films, than they might be warranting. So
Interesting, because I'm the opposite way. I think that people like could read more into it. I think there's like I
I
think
hope
he's
they
just
do. I mean, yeah.
it's just so fascinating. I think that's like there's not that many directors these days where we can have these types of conversations about like intent and just like the messiness of what they're trying to do. And I don't know. It's nice to have people like him around that we can
Yeah,
like.
he reminds me a little bit of Lars von Trier in that way, I guess. Like you can never really tell how sincere or how like insincere he is.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's the impression I get at least. But I will say, like, yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this film quite a bit, and I do think what Corinne does here, it worked for me more so than it did for Spring Breakers. So I don't know if that's going to translate well to anyone who only knows Corinne through Spring Breakers. I think it's if you haven't seen any other Corinne film besides Spring Breakers, I guess this would probably be the best one to go with for your second one, just because his other films don't really reflect either of these ones. But
Stay away from Trash Jumpers.
oh, that's I was gonna say that's the only one I haven't seen because I have my own limits.
Yeah, I do too. I wouldn't make it, but it was shot here. That's a Nashville movie.
Oh, really?
So it's like, yeah, I feel like I almost have to watch it now because it's like I might see shooting locations I recognize, and those characters came by the Nashville Scenes office at the film's release and like did like a photo shoot. So, but apparently it's also like one person said I read a review on Letterboxd where it's like their friends started praying in the middle of the movie as if to like settle themselves to like feel some sense of normalcy, and I was like, that's what they said, and I was like, oh wow, I've not heard of that before, and I know the feeling.
All right, well, if you see it, more power to you, man.
Exactly.
I think that one I'm gonna skip out on.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
but that's a beach bum. If anyone checks it out, I'm curious to hear what they think of it.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like the reviews right now are pretty mixed. It seems like even people who really got a kick out of Spring Breakers are kind of indecisive or kind of picking different sides in this film, which I find a little more interesting than the conversation around Spring Breakers. So, let's see. We're going a little long, but let's see. We could talk about 5 Feet Apart. We could talk about Shazam, or I could talk about The Inventor, the HBO documentary. What are you feeling, Corey?
Interesting. I'll say just quick thoughts on the two things I watched this weekend.
Okay.
All 5 Feet Apart. I really enjoyed the performances in it. I think that Haley Richardson is like one of our new great actresses.
For sure.
I thought Cole Sprouse did a really good job.
That's interesting.
I think he has a little bit of a, he's like kind of a not narrow focused actor, but like I think he's kind of got a type that he kind of has to do when he's playing that character on Riverdale.
Yeah.
I imagine that that's a very influential role on him. That's going to get him typecast and stuff. But I thought he showed some nuance that I wasn't expecting from the kid from Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. But I don't know. I liked that movie's willingness to tell that story, although I think it does that story a disservice by making it so melancholic and tropey. I think it has moments that are nuanced and that really kind of dig in, like The Fault in the Stars, at the realities of the situation. They don't over-aggrandize the romance, but then they do in a very explicit way. And if it weren't for the performances, I think it would completely fall off the rails and become just very overindulgent. But I think it's a fine movie. It's not one I'd really recommend you see in theaters, but I think if you've got kids and they like movies like this, and if you want to learn more about cystic fibrosis, I think they do a good job of highlighting the just really tragic parts of that illness, and it's representation. It's new ways of telling stories, and I feel like obviously that they don't get actors that have that disease, which I think would obviously make it much more impactful. But they're letting that story be known, and I think that there's good things about it, but it's just another difficult conversation where it's like, who tells your story? Is it being told in a proper way? I don't know. I mean, I'd be curious to hear from people who are around this disease if the film does it justice. I don't exactly know, but I think it's a fine movie. I wouldn't really watch it again, but I think it's okay. And then I saw Medea's family funeral, and
all right, yeah.
I'll say one thing. It's basically like if Tyler Perry wanted to pull up producers and say, I want to make a Medea movie so bad that no one will ever want to watch a Medea movie ever again. And it turned out to be so bad that it's almost watchable. And if you ever get a chance to watch this movie and you just want to kill your time, do it. and know that Uncle Heathrow is like an end of days figure. Like when
Wow.
the four horsemen of the apocalypse come in, I imagine Uncle Heathrow will be one of them. It's like
Oh.
Perry's most recent creation. It is so abysmal that it's like almost genius, but also bad. This movie, it's a very bad movie, but at the same time, it's just like fascinating. So I don't want to dwell too long on Medea's family funeral, but Medea's done. I think it's a much better character than a lot of the movies were, but man, this one was quite a capper.
Yeah, because I know you tend to have a softer spot for the Medea movies than I do, and I think a couple other
Mhm.
people do.
I think
Yeah.
there's some decent ones in there, and I think the one that he did with Taraji P Henson is actually a good movie. I think it's thoroughly good.
You
But
mean I Can Do Battle by Myself?
oh yeah, I think that's a
Yeah,
good.
I think that's his best film. Yeah, I think that's a solid film. I would think that, and yeah, I mean, as a filmmaker, I can't say I'm a Tyler Perry fan, but I do think that he has gotten pretty close. I mean, just by the nature of directing as long as he does, or how many films as he does. That was pretty good. For Color Girls, definitely had its moments. Trying to think what else. Daddy's Girls, I think was called the one with Idris Elba.
I liked Big Happy Family. It's actually pretty decent.
Medea's Big Happy Family. Is that
Yeah, it's got Loretta Devine in it, and she does a really good job. And
Okay.
she's a very underrated actress, so I was really kind of happy to see her take a role in it.
Yeah, I was trying to think. Is that the one that I was thinking of with Alfred Woodard? Or is that like?
Maybe this is the one that had Bow Wow in it. More of a straight.
Yeah, no, I know which one you're thinking of.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's pretty decent. I mean, it's got some pretty inspired set pieces in it, and then obviously the Red Divine's really good. But
Well, she's always good, right?
oh yeah, she's great. I mean, she's just a very reliable character actress that I think has not always gotten the roles she deserves. But very interesting guy. I think he's a much better actor than he is a filmmaker when he does a serious role, because he's great in Vice, he's great in Gone Girl. Like he's got talent, I mean, obviously, but he doesn't usually have to use it since he's like a major media mogul now.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think it was the film I was thinking of was The Family That Prays.
Yeah.
With Kathy Bates. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think there's just something about his films where he kind of makes them at a regular clip, and the ones of late have been excessively lazy to me in a way that just feels like like the Boo movies, Medea Witness Protection. It just feels. What's that?
Medea's like Christmas or something.
Oh, I forgot about that one with Larry the Cable Guy.
It's bad.
Yeah. I should mention that I've seen almost all the Medea movies except for Medea Family Funeral. I don't know why, but I've seen almost all of them. And I'll probably check out Medea's Family Funeral just because, I made it this far. Why not?
And he just about his school last year, which I actually thought was okay.
I wasn't crazy about that one, truth be told, but I was curious to see him take on a studio film and kind of expand beyond his usual brand, Medea, and kind of making a film outside of the typical Tyler Perry Studios franchise, or brand, I guess, as well. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what's going to happen for him after this, but it'll be curious to see, I suppose. And I'm very curious to see if this is truly the end for Medea, or if she's going to come back in some variation or form in the future.
Who's to say?
Yeah, well, Tyler Perry is to say.
Yeah. I'm allergic to the idea of no more Medea. It makes me sneeze. I need more Medea movies.
Yeah, let's just. I'm gonna say we'll just real quick. I want to hear your thoughts on Shazam, and then we'll wrap up this week's episode.
Okay. I really enjoyed it. Obviously it's not like the first time we've had like a superhero movie, but funny. Like we've had those, so it kind of feels like it's just retreading some enjoyable ground there. But I think it's well done. I think David Sandberg is another guy that's coming from horror that knows how to work in the genre, and knows the beats, knows the darkness, knows the light, and it's just kind of a fun millennial, poppy big riff, I guess. And I think Zachary Levi is fantastic in that role. I think it's a star-making turn for him at a point in his career where I think he really needed a role like that to really establish himself among the pack. But it's really fun. I don't know if it's got some really heady material that I appreciated. There's some interesting commentary on the hero's journey and what makes a hero, and we've seen it before, but I think it handles it well. So as a film, I think it will get some. It felt fresh enough with what it does, but I think it will get more originality points than it necessarily deserves because it's very similar to Spider-Man: Homecoming to the point where they both use Ramon songs over like comic book, like sketchy.
Yeah, for the end credits.
Yeah, that's like a direct homage, I guess. But
Mhm.
I really enjoyed it. It's a movie where I don't. The one thing I will say about it is it hasn't like stuck with me like I thought it would. Like it feels a bit more vapid than you might expect when you watch it. Like I think it's just more of the experience and the fun of it and one appreciating Levi. And but it's just a thoroughly good movie for what it's trying to do. And I don't really want to watch it again, but like if I did, I wouldn't be against it. You know, it's just it's not Aquaman. At least I'll say that because I really loved Aquaman, but
Aquaman
um,
was fun.
it was fun. And this one's it's really good for what it's trying to do, and I appreciate it. I appreciate DC giving these stories some breathing room finally and some proper filmmaking. But I'm a little less big on it, no pun intended, than I was when I first saw it.
Mhm.
But I think that's just the nature of it. Is it's more of the fun experience, and you just kind of leave it where it is when you go.
Yeah, I generally agree. I'll talk about it more next week. Overall, I did enjoy the film. I do think it has some glaring problems, like being way too long and maybe a little uneven in terms of the story. But yeah, I think what works here really works. And I agree with you, Zachary Levi. He's just so charismatic and fun in the role that I think he's really going to win people over
Yeah.
post Chuck.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm curious to talk about that more next week, but I just wanted to hear your thoughts before we wrap this week's episode up. So yeah, like we said, oh, sorry, what?
No, it's a fun movie. It's
Yeah,
definitely it's got a little spirit to it. I appreciate it, and it's irreverent enough, and I definitely would recommend it.
yeah. I will say though, it does feel like the most like DC trying to make a Marvel movie
Yes.
approach. Like it just feels like just make one that I guess everyone wants, which is like a fun, lighthearted movie. And I guess the response so far has been, yes, this is what we wanted. So
Yeah. Take my money.
so that's fine. I mean, it seems like it's definitely going to be a crowd pleaser, which is cool. But I agree with you. Yeah, it feels a little more disposable than the other DC movies, for better or for worse.
I agree.
But yeah, next week we'll talk about Shazam a little more. We'll also talk about Pet Cemetery. I'm pretty excited about that film. I've been reading the book, so I'm curious to talk about that film once I see that. And then we also have The Best of Enemies, which I'm seeing on Wednesday. Are you seeing any of these films, Corey? Besides Shazam, obviously.
Yeah, I'll be seeing. I think I'm going to do Best of Enemies on Wednesday as
Okay.
well, and then I'd like to see Pet Cemetery and Dolby some
Yeah.
point next weekend. So yeah,
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I think I don't think I have a screening for Pet Cemetery unfortunately coming up this week, but that's fine. Yeah, I'll just have to give it my money. So,
yeah,
yeah. But also we also have Shrill on Hulu, which is a show John and I have watched. We're going to talk about that show this week. But since he's not here, I'm holding that off. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to talk about The Inventor, Alfred Blood in Silicon Valley, the new Alex Gibney documentary about Elizabeth Holmes. And then I've watched an hour so far of Dragged to Get Across Concrete. I think, is it Dragged Across Concrete? Is that the title of the film?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting film. I was texting about it with Corey a little bit. I don't know what to make of it so far, and maybe I'll have a better idea next week if I find the time to talk about it. So, with that, thank you for listening to this week's episode of Cinemaholics. Be sure to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and Stitcher, and also hang out with us on Facebook and Twitter. I am primarily the social media person, so if you ever feel a need to reach out to us, I'm probably the one that's going to respond to you, so just keep that in mind, I suppose. And if you want to email us, you can talk to us at cinemaholics@gmail.com. Corey, thank you again so much for joining us, especially at last minute. I really appreciate you being here to talk about Dumbo and Beach Bum as long as we did. I think that was a lot of fun.
I gotta say, I'm surprised we got this under 2 hours. Like, I almost feel like it's a short episode considering the two types of movies we're talking about.
I know, yeah. I mean, you want to make it 2 hours?
I mean, we could. I mean,
Yeah.
we've got 15 minutes. I mean,
yeah, let's just draw this thing out as long as we want.
exactly.
John's not here to tell us when we need to stop.
Exactly. You can't tell me what to do.
We'll just keep it going.
Exactly.
So how you doing?
Marathon. I'm doing great. I mean, I'm going to go through all my favorite. Let's just get into '90s nostalgia pieces, and all my favorite bizarre intricacies of the latter, the non-Looney Tunes, non-Space Jam Looney Tune entries of the of film and television from that period. But
Oh man. Well, I was gonna ask you what your top five Tim Burton films were.
oh, good question. I would definitely say number one is always going to be Pee Wee. I think that's his best movie. I think it's
Okay.
just really, really, really fun. I would probably say ooh, that's tough. You always want to like feel like Nightmare Before Elm Street, or not, I mean Nightmare Before Christmas is like one of his movies, but it's not. I would say Batman Returns would be second.
Okay. That's
I would,
I like that.
which is a good movie.
It's
Oh,
really
actually,
good.
it is, and I probably put Frank and Weenie third.
Oh, okay,
Um,
cool.
and I might interchange those. I love both those movies. I think Frank and Winnie's like one of the great stop motion movies we've ever gotten. So I think it's
Yeah, I
brilliant.
love it. I love it.
I would probably put Mars Attacks fourth
Wow. Okay. I
because I
support it.
really,
Yeah. It's hell
I
yeah.
mean, it's just such a fun movie. And I'd probably go. I'd probably say Sweeney Todd fifth.
Okay. Cool. I was gonna say for me, Ed Wood is the best in my opinion, or my favorite.
Um,
Close second is Edward Scissorhands.
mhm.
Third is Big Fish. I love Big Fish. Four. Hmm. Let's see. I might go with Freaking Weenie for that one, but I don't know. I really do like Frankenweenie, and I'm trying to think if there's any ones that we didn't talk about that I'm blanking on right now. I think there's Beetlejuice.
Mhm.
You know what? I'm gonna go with Beetlejuice for number four,
Fun movie.
and then five is either Pee Wee or I'm blanking on another one. I think. Oh well. Actually, no, I'll go five Frankenweenie. So yeah, that's my top five.
It's always interesting, like his
Oh wait,
biggest.
no, wait, I'm sorry. Five was I was gonna do Batman Returns. My bad.
Mhm. It's always interesting that like the first Batman is really his most influential film in terms of like modern theater, and it's like I still think that's more of a performance movie than like it's a really good movie, but it's just like I think it's more centered on what Nicholson's doing than anything else, and then Keaton.
Uh, wait, Nicholson?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, yeah, Jack Nicholson, I guess, for the first Batman.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, for Batman. Sorry, I was like, sorry, my mind went to Beetlejuice for some reason.
Yeah, Jack Nicholson's cameo, and
Yeah.
not a lot of people know about. There's like Foot shows up.
Well, I was just gonna say because I feel like sometimes like the Beetlejuice can be a performance piece, mainly for Michael Keaton,
Oh yeah,
but the movie's just so good anyway
no,
that I mean, yeah, and I mean, you can. I don't know if you can ever top that movie, and I am very afraid to see that sequel they keep teasing from the.
yeah, I think no pun intended, but kind of like that light in a casket.
Yeah. I mean, just having the guy from Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter and Pride,
Yeah,
Prejudice and Zombies like writing it, I don't know. It just doesn't sound right to me.
no, I don't feel it.
Yeah. Uh we're almost we have 10 minutes. We want to keep this thing 2 hours.
We could. I mean, we
Yeah.
might as well. Life's short.
Yeah.
Um, so as we're getting into April, I mean, what movies are you looking forward to this month?
Well, Pet Cemetery.
Yeah.
What's coming out?
Well, we got Missing Link. I'm seeing that on
Oh yeah,
Saturday.
yeah, me too. Yeah.
I am very looking forward to that. It looks a little sillier than some of their other movies, but like I think it still looks like it's going to be a ton of fun, which is good because we haven't gotten a Leica film in like 3 years almost. So
Yeah.
great.
High Life, I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah, that will be interesting. If people, Claire Denis is a really big stan culture person. I think she's got a lot of fans in the film community.
Hmm.
That'll be fun. I'm curious about Hellboy. I don't know if excited.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
It'll be fun, and I love David Harbour and Ian McShane. So, and then also Sasha Lane's in it. I mean, Daniel Day Kim, Thomas Hayden Church. Like it's got Mia Jovovich. It's got a lot of good people in it,
Hmm.
but it just the trailers aren't very good.
Yeah,
Uh,
I don't know. I'm curiously optimistic, I guess.
yeah, oh yeah, and I've seen Under the Silver Lake that comes out.
Oh yeah, I was gonna bring that up. Yeah, so you've seen that one already.
I have. It's a trip. It's a
Good trip or bad trip?
it's a good question. I think it's going to vary for a lot of people because it's
Okay.
basically like we actually when we saw last movie we saw together was The Long Goodbye
Right.
by Robert Altman. And this is like the millennial version of that almost mixed together with some aspects of like Chinatown and Inherent Vice, and that was like who's the guy that wrote Inherent Vice? Thomas Pynchon.
Pynchon, yeah.
Yeah, it's like mixed in with a lot of that, and then a little bit of occult stuff. So it's really an interesting film. It's got a lot of really good flair to it. Andrew Garfield's good. It's got a good story. It's very all over the place, and it's a movie that people are gonna. It's gonna develop a very exact subculture of people that watch it like 12 times and will go back and forth on it to see what's about. And some people will just be like, no, and never watch it again. So it's gonna it'll be a cult film, and I think that's fascinating for what the guy that's doing that after it follows. So. I'm a fan. I really liked it a lot. I'd like to see it on the big screen just to like be able to soak it all in.
Assuming it ever gets a theatrical release in the United States.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think it is. I think they're probably just trying to dump it on VOD.
I'm surprised they haven't already. Honestly,
they have in Europe.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like out. You can. There's less legal ways you can watch it, but you can watch it.
It's like, and who shot it? I'm curious if the guy that shot that is the one that. Yeah, it's Mike Giolakis who did Us and did It Follows. Is the guy that was the cinematographer here, and he does phenomenal work. And he also shot Split and Glass
and Us, right?
He's the Us guy. So
I'm loving his stuff. Yeah, I think his cinematography is great.
It is. He's very much a rising person.
I was gonna say also, who's the guy who shot Beach Bum?
Benoit Debie.
Yeah, because he did Climax, and I thought that's some of my best or some of my favorite cinematography of the year. So
Locus and Debie are like up and comers.
Yeah, they're like the new Deacons and Lubeski.
Exactly. I'm here. I'm Locus especially. Yeah. And Debie, he did Spring Breakers, so it's like, I mean, this is one of my favorite cinematography films of the decade, if that's even a word. But it's so good.
Oh, speaking of Deacons, we'll wrap this up pretty soon, guys. I just rewatched Oh Brother, Where Art Thou this weekend.
Right on. I saw that. I did that back in December on 35.
Oh, really? Oh yeah. I'm jealous.
Oh man, it was a blast. They did it at the Belcourt, and it was just it was joy. It's one of my favorite movies.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, it was my introduction to the Coen brothers when I was a kid. So,
right on.
I got to see they did a soundtrack playthrough at a concert venue close to by where they had like local and touring bluegrass groups play the album.
Oh, sweet.
So I saw that on Saturday, and that was really fun. Inspired me to rewatch the movie, and it's a great little movie. I think people, I don't know, for some reason I guess it gets called like a second rate or like a second tier Coen brother film.
I think it's because it's popular.
Really? Because I feel like it might just be because it's like a little less like focused than some of his other films, but
it's pretty strict to like its story. I mean,
right, but like it's just like a lot of like character interactions and stuff, kind of similar to Beach Bum in some ways.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of like that it's anecdotal.
Yeah. Somebody, what reminded me is that some critic compared the Beach Bum to Harmony Korine's Home or The Odyssey, and that's what made me think of that.
Interesting. That's a good way to put that.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I think we fulfilled our time limit.
I think we have, and I'll close it by saying I'm seeing a 35 of Singing in the Rain tomorrow night.
Oh, really? Right? Awesome.
Oh, yeah. And Stanley Donen, who just passed away. They're just retrospective for him at the Belcourt in Nashville, so I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I guess anyone who listens to this podcast is probably a big fan of film projections, but yeah, anybody, if you ever get a chance, these days to see classic films projected on film, take up that opportunity if you can. I mean, it's gorgeous often to see these films that are already great in 35 millimeter. I cannot fully describe the joy that can come from those experiences. So definitely anybody, if you get a chance in your nearby theaters, if you get a chance to see something in 35 millimeter, seek it out. So I think that's a good nose ending to end this overlong episode.
We did Dumbo, man. We had to have a big ears edition.
Yes, exactly. So, all right, this is the actual end of the podcast. From the internet, Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
From the internet in Nashville, I'm Corey Woodruff.
All right, everybody. Until next time.
See ya.